Ugh! Why does my 300 DPI file still look like garbage? I hear this all the time, and the truth is 300 DPI doesn't mean what you think it means. Let's break this down with some simple visuals so it finally makes sense. DPI and PPI are basically the same thing for our purposes. You can yell at me in the comments. Basically, you can think of it as how many dots are in 1 inch. This is 300 DPI, and this is 72 DPI. Generally speaking, images that exist on screen work fine at 72 DPI, and it keeps the file size down. The issue is that if you go to print something that's 72 DPI, it's going to look bad because printed things require 300 DPI to look nice and crisp. But wait. Before you click off this video thinking that you got it, 72 DPI screen, 300 DPI print, I'm all good. The problem is 300 DPI on its own is meaningless. Here's the problem. People will say, just make sure your file is 300 DPI. But that number doesn't mean anything by itself. 300 DPI just means 300 dots per inch. But how many inches are we talking about? If your file isn't set in inches, 300 DPI is a meaningless description. It's like saying 300 cheeses per pizza, but there's no pizzas. There's no pizzas. There's no pizza. Although working in pixel-based art is generally fine as long as you're working at a big enough size, many people often feel like they need to be working in vector so that their art is not constrained to those pixels. If you don't know what vector art is, it's just infinitely scalable file type that looks great small and doesn't lose any quality if it was printed as big as a building. It's kind of magical. You may be thinking, why don't we all just always work in vector? Then we don't even have to think about pixels. Well, a lot of drawing apps don't natively let you draw in vector, and even if they do, working in vector doesn't have the same feel as pixel-based brushes, which are able to emulate a more analog, traditional experience. For example, a lot of people work in Procreate, and Procreate does not have the ability to work directly in vector. But that doesn't mean you can't turn that artwork into vector art. And that leads us perfectly into the sponsor of this video, Kittl. Kittl has some amazing vector tools that allow you to convert existing artwork into vector that you can fully customize. If you aren't familiar with Kittl, it's like an all-inclusive platform for professionals in teams. Basically has everything in one place. It's got premium fonts, elements, textures, and mockups. You can go from ideation to creation all on Kittl. So to test out their vector tools, I brought in this pixel-based image that I drew, tapped the vectorizer button, and it immediately turned it into vector art. Once it was vector artwork, I was able to directly select individual points and curves and fine-tune them and adjust them to get them just right. The pen tool was nice and easy to use. Just click to add points and then pull a little bit to get the curves just right. And I knew that if I didn't get it right the first time, I could just go in afterwards and tweak those points a little bit and smooth out the curves if needed. So if we just click on add smartboard, I'm just gonna type black hoodie. Look at that. See, this is the kind of AI I can get down with, where it just takes that busy work of making a mock-up away from me. T-shirt. That's cool. Dark shirt version. Okay, let's see what it would look like as a mural. Just type in mural, keeping it simple. Look at that with the brick coming through. What would this look like as a hat? Just sit back here and enjoy my beverage while Kittl does the hard stuff for me. Look at that. It made it look like embroidery. Honestly, that was wild, right? I think you should give Kittl a try. I think you'll be impressed too. And if you are impressed, like I think you will be, you can use my promo code CRISPYT to get 25% off all Kittl plans, including annual, for new users. Link below. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about resolution and how it pertains to the actual work that I do. I do a lot of drawing that doesn't necessarily have an end goal in mind. I just like to make stuff and I draw a lot, but sometimes those things turn into other stuff, like maybe something that I doodled, I end up wanting to make into a shirt. So I tend to work at a high enough resolution that makes that possible, because in most cases, I'm working in pixel-based art because of that natural drawing experience. I generally don't choose to work in vector if I'm just drawing for fun. It's usually if I know that there's like a specific reason that it's going to need to be vector in the long run. And there's like a common misconception that all artwork should be vector so that it's always scalable. but it's compromised. If your style is a style that allows for it to always look vector and you enjoy drawing in vector, then yeah, absolutely. But if it doesn't necessarily work for you, or it's not the best experience or not the way you can make your best work, then you shouldn't do that. You should just work at a resolution that's big enough. Let's talk about what big enough actually means. So if I'm just sitting down to draw something, like maybe one of the prompts for the upcoming Stinktober challenge, more info about that below. When I'm starting a new document for something like this, I'll generally set my file size around 4,000 to 5,000 pixels. I find that this is a nice, happy medium size that is not a huge file, but it also gives me the flexibility so that I could print this if I decided I wanted to in the future. Let's get a calculator so we can talk about this real quick. So if my file is 5,000 pixels wide, all I would need to do is divide that by 300 to find out how many inches this could print and still look crispy. So 5,000 divided by 300 equals 16.66666. So that's almost 17 inches wide. That's a pretty big size. Sure, I couldn't print this the size of a billboard, but 17 inches wide is perfect for a shirt, a poster, for nearly anything that I would want to use this for. And generally, if something is going to get printed bigger than that, it's usually not like a willy-nilly thing, like some random thing that I drew. Oh, suddenly it needs to be a billboard. Like if you're doing something that needs to be printed huge, you usually know that going into it, or you're at least revising it or doing something to make it work for those purposes. Working at a fairly large resolution like this is not just so that I have the option for printing it. I actually do it because it gives me better brush control. When you're working at a lower resolution or a smaller file size, there's less pixels and less pixels to take your mark making, so it gives you less control over the image. And also if you're like zooming in to like work on detail stuff, it's going to look all pixelated, which isn't ideal, and it's hard to kind of work when it looks like that. And that brings me to another important point about print resolution and why 300 DPI isn't always the answer. For example, if I'm hired to do an illustration that's going to be printed, let's say it's a spot illustration in a magazine, and that illustration is going to be 4 by 6 inches. Based on everything we've talked about, you may think, okay, so we'll just set the file size at 4 inches by 6 inches at 300 DPI, and we are good to go. The problem with that is that file size is only 1,200 pixels wide. And as I just mentioned, I typically work at around 5,000 pixels wide, so that lack of pixels isn't going to give me as much control and make my working experience as good as it could possibly be. So what do I do for a situation like this? I will set it to 4 by 6, but then I will just bump the resolution up until it's close to the pixel size that I generally like working in. Then when I'm finished with that, I can easily shrink it down and send it off. And to be perfectly honest, sometimes I forget and we'll just send it as is, and it's never been a problem. And that's an important thing to remember. You can always shrink your image down and it's not going to lose any quality. It's when you try to make a pixel-based image bigger, because those pixels don't exist. You're just kind of stretching them out, or whatever software you're using is trying to like imagine what those pixels could be, and it's generally not going to be very good. Let's do a quick recap, because I've been throwing a lot of numbers at you. If you set your file in pixel size, you can ignore DPI because it's not relevant to you. If you're setting your file in inches, then you best believe that DPI is important because it tells you how many dots should be in those inches. If something's going to be printed, you need that to be 300 dots per inch minimum. For just pure drawing pleasure and experience, I find 4,000 pixels to be the sweet spot for me. If you're working in vector art, then don't sweat it. None of this matters. Nothing matters. You can do anything. So hopefully this clears up why sometimes your high-res file isn't. If it doesn't, let me know in the comments and I'll try to clear it up some other way. All right. Good talk. Don't count all your pixels before they hatch. Don't put all your pixels in one basket. Don't... Did that personal pizza thing make sense? Because, like, it's personal pizza, but then you're just making the slices for... Because it's like, it's not enough. Right?